drive. Tatum the finish. It is Baylor 18. The mission demanding is mission accomplished.
What's up, everyone? This is Noa Dalzell with a Monday night episode of You Got Boston. Rare off day for the Celtics and therefore for me, and I'm joined by a special guest, my dad, who some of you have met in previous episodes. We had a good offseason episode with my dad and Peyton Pritchard's college coach, and I think that one's worth revisiting, but I will let you introduce yourself.
Okay. I'm Noah's dad. My name is John.
Give us some background. I have to explain why do we care about your opinion? What are your credentials?
I don't know why anybody cares about my opinion. In fact, usually people don't care about my opinion. But I used to be. I'm still Noah's dad, and I used to be a pro basketball overseas, pro basketball player. Basketball has been a huge part of my life. That's why when I listen to Noah talk about her history and her family, that it was kind of a religion, and I grew up also in a family where basketball was kind of a religion. My dad was a basketball player. My brothers were basketball players, and I grew up as a basketball player. And I still play basketball, and I still love the game. And I actually grew up, which is another thing that I may have said to somebody on the last time I was on a podcast. But I also grew up as a Celtics fan, even though I grew up in upstate New York. My dad was a huge Celtics fan. He believed that the Celtics were the greatest basketball team. He loved John Havlicek. Everything he believed as what should be and who is a great basketball player. He often used the Celtics as an example, and it was just a really amazing kind of thing that happened in my life is that I ended up actually moving to Boston 20 years ago, just randomly, kind of by accident, and it ended up that I ended up living a mile from TD Garden and end up going to lots of Celtics games. I never went to a Celtics game growing up because I was living in upstate New York. I just watched them on TV. And then suddenly I'm living in Boston and I'm growing up and my children are going with me to Celtics games, and basketball all of a sudden is like way back in my life. And then you come along and become a sports, superstar, podcaster. And start doing your thing with the Celtics and writing and all that stuff. So it's like brought me back into the fold of basketball, and I'm so happy to be here and love being around basketball, talking about basketball, and I still love the Celtics. So I guess we will always have that in common.
So now everybody knows where I learned to talk for. And I will say it's funny because whenever we go on the road and we see Celtics fans in different cities, I always ask them, are you from Boston? Why are you a Celtics fan? And usually people's stories, like my dad's was a Celtics fan. It's not necessarily geographic based. And I feel like your family is a good example of that. That it's really, people will tell me my grandfather was a Celtics fan. I've never even been to New England, but they're decked out in Tatum gear.
True. It's true. So, my dad, your grandpa was a part owner of the Celtics. You know that, right? I told you that story. Yes.
What
because one year they went public. One year, the Celtics organization went public. I don't remember the year, but I was probably a teenager, and they sold stocks of the Boston Celtics, and he bought $300 worth of stock. He bought $100 for me and $100. Yeah, no, but then they, a couple of years later, they didn't go public anymore, and they sent everybody a check for $115. And one of the things, as you know, I'm a collector of everything that I've ever had as far as basketball. I had a check that was written in my name from the Boston Celtics, paying me back for the stock that I owned, and I lost it. And I don't know where it is. I can't believe I don't have it, but yeah,
that's funny. I feel like nowadays, if teams went public and people could buy stocks in them, it would be very dangerous because already people's fandoms are crazy. I can't imagine if people are putting money into the teams themselves, although maybe sports betting is even more than that. So maybe it's actually not that. It wouldn't be that different. But as always, this is actually going to be a pretty normal episode of You Got Boston. I just figured that my dad would come on just so we hear from somebody else. I know you guys hear from me quite a bit, but feel free to put any questions, either Celtics questions or they can be specific questions in the chat, as always. We're going to talk about just impressions of the Celtics through the first 24 games of the season. Somehow we're almost a third of the way to the regular season. And so it feels like it was literally yesterday that we were talking about preseason and who was going to play and what they were going to look like. But here we are. It's pretty remarkable, honestly, just how fast everything has gone. And this was a pretty busy stretch. We have a pretty slow week coming up. So that's why I figured we'd do a couple of these episodes. And as you know, Garden Report, we go live after every game. You can subscribe on CLNS Media to all of those. And then if you are watching this on CLNS, you can subscribe to my show, You Got Boston, which we're trying to go mostly on off days, just as a Q&A. And that is also on YouTube. So thank you all so much for the support. And it's funny to see, I see Pete, that's funny that you're a Celtics fan because of Latvia, because I feel like we have a lot of people in this community that are from Portugal because of Nimi, from Latvia because of KP. So it is interesting how I don't know, is that the reason that you're a Celtics fan? Is it because of KP or is it not unrelated? You can put it in that chat, but I'm curious. So in any case, I want to share my initial impressions on the first kind of a third of the season here. And then my dad will share some as well. And then you guys can, anything specific you want to hear about, we can talk about as well. And I'll also just maybe before I get into that, just because it's top of mind, I was in Maine yesterday, and it was funny because we had a couple of Celtics players that were literally on Saturday night in Boston playing against the Grizzlies. And they actually didn't play, but it was Jrue Peterson, Baylor Scheierman, and Jordan Walsh. And Jack, Simone, and I, we were planning on going to Maine on Sunday, but it's 5 games and 7 nights for the Celtics. That also means that it's 5 days and 7 nights for us, which means that we're at TD Garden until 12:31 in the morning. So we were talking about maybe we just don't go to this game. And then we were like, okay, if we're too tired to go to this game tomorrow, how are the players feeling? And they all ended up going. And so in any case, I was at the Maine Celtics game yesterday, got to talk to Baylor Scheierman and Jordan Walsh after the game, which was, for those of you that watched, it was a crazy finish, one of the worst calls I've seen, honestly, in a very long time. But with that being said, if you guys want to hear more about Baylor and Jordan, feel free to put those questions in the chat as well. I know we had talked about Baylor and his prospects. I could continue to be really impressed by him. I think that he just plays with so much energy. There were a couple of times yesterday where the Celtics were kind of flat, and Tyler Lashbrook, the head coach, just looked over to Baylor and had him check in. He's the energy guy, but he's also a skills guy. So it's a cool combination. So I think he's going to be an NBA player. It's early on for him. He's just been there for a few months, but I think he's going to be an NBA player. And then Jordan Walsh had looked the best that I've ever seen him look in Maine, which is definitely a good sign because he hasn't been there all year. And I think that, you want to see him continue improving. But also he had actually asked, I wrote a story about this for Celtics blog, which I'll link in the comments, but he had actually asked to go to Maine. So he wasn't assigned there. I think a lot of people saw okay, he finally gets his assignment. That happens. But I asked him when did you find out you were going to come to Maine? And he said, I actually was never asked to come here yesterday to practice. I was kind of asking the player development staff, can I spend my day off in Maine? Otherwise I'm literally just going to be sitting at home. Can I go do something? I'd love to go up to Maine. He said he loves the food in Portland, so he wanted to visit all of his favorite spots. So he went up there. He was excellent. And then he just went right back to Boston. So Baylor's going to be in Maine for a while. So we'll have more coverage and updates from his development over in Maine. Jrue Peterson, I didn't get a chance to talk to, so I'm not sure when his schedule is going to be, but I assume he'll be back in Boston since he was in the rotation so recently. So that's the brief Maine update. JD Davison continues to be one of the best players in the G League. He's currently leading the G League in points. He's one of the leading leading the league in assists. So he's phenomenal. There's a question of how is it going to translate to the NBA? I'm really not sure because we really haven't seen it. So it's just kind of a imaginative thing right now. There are some moves that he does where I'm I don't know if this would work in the NBA, but then again, you just never know until you see it. So we'll see. I'm quite curious, just while we're on the topic, do you have any thoughts on Jordan, Baylor, Jrue? Do any of them stand out to you? As we're talking here about, backup wings and who might be able to be serviceable either this season or in the future.
You asking me?
Yeah, I'm asking you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the interesting thing that I think all those guys, and I think they've all shown flashes, up at this point in the season, they've shown flashes of being legitimate, NBA players. And the beauty of it, and this is what I really enjoy, and I think everyone enjoys it. The fans are totally on board, and I believe that the entire organization is on board to what Coach Mazzulla is doing. And that is, if you're on this team, you're going to get not just a small opportunity, you're going to get a real opportunity to show whether you belong or not. And I think that that's something that is really, it's unique, because for many, many years, the NBA was a place where the top 7-8 players played, and the last 4 or 5 guys, you didn't see them the whole year unless they were up by 30 or down by 30, and they never really got a chance. That's not what he does. What he does, he puts guys in at money time that you would not expect to be in the game. He keeps doing it over and over again. And what he's done, and it's public knowledge, is he puts those guys on the bench with the intention that you better be ready, because you never know I'm going to put you in the game. I might put you in the game in the first quarter. I might put you in the game and start you in the second half. You don't know, because he has and will do anything. And that's beautiful for a player to have that. You know, I can only imagine the difference between sitting on the bench on a team where you know that you're not going to get in unless they're up by 25, and that goes for probably 75% of bench players around the league. That you know that you're going to warm up with the intention that you're going to be ready, and if you didn't get in tonight, that doesn't mean you're not going to get in tomorrow. So I think all those guys have shown flashes. And they've shown flashes where, you know, that there's a question mark that also arises, you know, when they do certain things, or they show, you know, Keita doesn't look good for a small stretch of a couple of games and all that. But I think that at this point, the jury is still out. And the good thing is that the jury will have enough time to make a real decision on whether these guys belong or whether they don't. And I wouldn't be surprised if at least 2 or 3 of those guys end up being legitimate NBA players. And I think right now, you know, we can all speculate who they might be, but I think it's tough to do that. Jrue Peterson, you know, that came out of nowhere as far as I think all of us, at least us fans on the outside. I couldn't believe that he just all of a sudden was in the mix there and played, you know, 10 minutes in the first quarter and another 10 minutes in the second quarter or something like that. He ended up playing like 20 minutes.
He played the entire second quarter. Yeah, and he said afterwards, he told Bobby Manning actually in the locker room that they said Jrue, and he didn't even move because he assumed Jrue Holiday, obviously. So Joe says Jrue, and he just sits there. And then eventually he realized they meant him. And actually, like, we've asked Joe. Joe's explained like why he doesn't tell people in advance about whether they're going to play. He strongly believes that if you tell a guy like you're going to play today, or you might play today, or you're probably not going to play today, then that person is going to change their routine, because now they know they're going to play. They're going to either do a little bit more, or on days where they're told they're not going to play, like human nature is going to kick in. And so he was like, I want every single person to prepare every single game as though they might actually play. And sometimes when I watch them in warm-ups, because we get there 3 hours before tip-off usually, you can see the first guys are warming up, and guys like Jaden Springer, who really hasn't played this year, he's like one of in the first group normally. And I always think to myself, like, he's going through the motions, like as though he's playing 30 minutes tonight, and I know he's not going to play. But then
he will. But he will. He will do that to him.
Yeah,
and he
so everybody got their opportunity at one point, and I think if you're not ready for your opportunity, that's when the problems start. But I agree with you.
And that's a beautiful thing. I mean, that's a beautiful thing that he's doing. And it's innovative beyond anybody's imagination, and it's working. And now everybody's looking around going, why didn't I think of that? But he's the one that came up with the idea. Yeah,
and I think honestly, so for me, you know, we've talked about, you know, those 3 wings, because they are kind of in a similar position. Like all 3 of them went from Maine to Boston, and from Boston to Maine on Sunday. All 3 of them have flashes of potential, things that they look good at. I think Baylor's hustle like stands out to me, but he might not have like the physical tools that the other 2 have. Like Jrue 6'9". That's like, I don't know if people realize how tall he is. He's like a true 6'9".
Yep.
And then Jordan has like a crazy wingspan. And then Jordan's a lot younger too. So it's like, you know, he could become a lot of things that maybe he's not right now, but he also, with that, he doesn't have as much basketball experience, like even though he's been in the NBA. So there's so many factors where every time I think like one has established themselves as the backup person. And again, we're talking like backup wing, because really Sam Hauser's the backup wing. And he hurt his adductor, which kept him out of the second half of that Grizzlies game on Saturday. And I thought that was a huge loss, because he's really been playing well. And then they didn't end up going with any of the backup wings. And so it kind of became, that's when they started maybe going double big and then that sort of thing. So we'll leave it at that with Maine. Yeah, it is funny. Sometimes you see guys in person, and it's like it's not what you expect. I mean, obviously, I see all the Celtics players in person all the time, but sometimes away player is like when you see a guy and you're like, this person, like I did not expect them to be this height, even though on paper it's like obviously they are. Someone like Nimi personally, and you met Nimi when you were in Maine, but like every time I stand next to him, I feel like I'm gonna I'm trying to ask him a question. I feel like he's like 10 feet tall. Like he's just one of those people. So, we're going to take a quick break just for here and continue to put questions in if you have them. And Tom, I'm going to get through all your questions in a moment. Had to do the usual Maine Celtics segment to begin with, because you guys know what's expected at this point if you're tuning in, that there's going to be some Maine Celtics stuff. So first, I just want to thank our friends over at Game Time. My dad actually has been a beneficiary of my love for Game Time. Game Time is the best ticketing app. I love going to watch basketball games. I like going to concerts, events. Noah Kahan was my top artist on Spotify. Been to a bunch of his concerts through Game Time. You can basically just ensure that your price is as cheap as it's going to be. So there is the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. You can also use all-in pricing. So the price that it says on the Game Time app for a ticket, whether that's a concert, a basketball game, whatever it is there's no fees later on. So it's literally the price that it says. And then my favorite thing is you can get seat views. So you can actually see what the court is going to look like from your seat. So if you use Game Time, you can see if you want to, like, I hate sitting behind the basket. I hate having that view where you can't, like, I like having the TV view. So I'd rather pay more money or sit in the balcony and make sure I can see like the TV view, which is what my press seats are, which I know sometimes when I post that people are like, why are you up in the sky? And I'm like, I actually like these seats. But you can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. I wish it was still my first purchase. What games have I brought you to recently? Opening night. That was a good one.
Geez, I don't remember. It's been a long time since you brought me to a game.
Opening night. That was like a month and a half ago.
That was a couple of years ago.
That one still cost me. That was the most expensive game of the year. Thank you very much. So download the Game Time app, create an account, use code CLNS for $20 off. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. So if you want to go to a Celtics game, you can literally check the upcoming schedule. There's a game against the Pistons on Thursday. I bet that's going to be cheap too because that was like a late ad because of the cup. So download Game Time today. What time is it? Game Time. Okay, so we did Maine, and we introduced Jordan Dalzell, former basketball player, I wanted to add this when you were giving your introduction, that we still play one-on-one sometimes. And back in the day, I could beat you like 2 or 3 years ago. And then
I don't recall that at all, but
he replaced his hips. Sure, and he replaced his knee. You didn't replace your knee, but what would you reconstruct your knee? What would you say?
I ruptured my quad tendon, and now I have a new one.
And then you also. Yeah, he replaced both of his hips, and for some reason now I can't beat him.
Well, it's all come together for me at 64. I'm suddenly back in action.
Yeah, so just like a lot of times we talk about how I've been dodging Jack in a one-on-one game. A lot of times when we go live, we get comments about that. But there's one clip of me scoring on him that's on YouTube, so I just want to leave it at that. There's no reason for me to reopen the conversation. Okay, but we're gonna start. I'm gonna scroll through some of these questions. Let's talk Marcus Smart's return, because I don't think we've even talked about it actually since he came back. So Marcus Smart returned on Saturday. It was his second time in the building, but it was his first time actually playing. Obviously, the big story was the Celtics lost, and also Marcus Smart played really poorly. He shot 1 of 11 from the field and only played 19 minutes. But from just an atmosphere standpoint, I honestly thought it was a little underwhelming. And I thought that maybe that's the result of people not caring as much about the trade now as they did a year ago because the Celtics won the championship and Porzingis was obviously a huge part of that. And everybody loves Porzingis. I mean, he's one of the most popular players on the team. It's hard to gauge, but when he walks onto the floor, there's such a loud crowd pop. It almost felt like, enough time had passed that there were people there in Smart jerseys and there were people there that were trying to meet him and get their autographs and things. But I expected a little bit more, just considering how a year ago, he wasn't even playing and there was tributes and there was just so much emotion. Another data point is that the ticket prices to get into this game, which he was playing in, were like $50, which is as cheap as it gets for a Celtics game. So there weren't really people like lining up to go watch Marcus Smart play TD Garden. And I do think as time has passed, more people have adopted this mindset of like maybe he was the problem, or like maybe we're better off without him. Whereas a year ago, when they hadn't won yet, like nobody really felt that way. I think everybody was sad that he was the player that they lost to get Porzingis, even though everybody loved Porzingis. So I'm not sure exactly why that is. I'm curious if other people have different thoughts about why maybe there was a little bit of an underwhelming feeling. Again, there was a huge crowd pop when he checked into the game. He said that it was awesome. I'm sure on a personal level for him, like all the personnel that he saw, like the team staff, the people in the arena, his former teammates, like I'm sure it was a lot of emotion. I'm sure he's not sitting there being like, I thought it would be a little bit louder. I feel that way a little bit just because it was so much louder a year ago, and we were there for that game when he was just there in the building, like, not playing when he was injured. That it does feel like some of it wore off, but it was still really cool, and it was still nice to kind of have.
I think it's a little bit of the second time around too, Noah. That it was already his return to the Garden, even though he didn't play. I think the fans were a little bit confused. Are we supposed to do this again? Because I was watching it also, and I expected to be ovation for like 5 straight minutes or something. That's what I would have thought he deserved. But I don't know.
And I know the fan base is
goes by.
I know there are people that love Marcus Smart, the people that never always kind of were not a huge fan. So part of it is that too, and part of it is the Celtics were losing. So I think the fans, when the Celtics are losing, nothing is gonna the fans are not gonna care about anything else. It doesn't matter who's in the building. It doesn't matter who's sitting courtside. Like that's just the way that it is. So that might have been a part of it as well. Like they weren't having the best game. But it was cool. It was cool to see him. He was happy to be back. And, the fact that he was coming off the bench made it nice because there was a moment where he checked in and there was a moment to recognize him. Jaylen Brown said afterwards, he's like a brother at this point. Tatum talked the day before how excited he was to play against him. He said he was going to tackle the shit out of him. I think there wasn't a quintessential Marcus Smart moment. There was actually one where Tatum was dribbling up the floor and did his classic, the little push off. And Marcus dove 5 feet, slid on the ground. And I thought to myself, okay, that's a quintessential play. We haven't seen one of those in a while. So that was kind of my thoughts on the Marcus Smart return. I think part of it was also the fact that, he didn't do much. I will say nobody tried to score on him. A couple of times, Tatum had him as a matchup. They always called for the switch. Obviously, he's a very good defender, but I was hoping to see a little bit more people taking Marcus to the basket just to have that moment. But yeah, for obvious reasons, people tried to avoid that matchup as much as possible. I think Porzingis did block him though, so that was one kind of shout out to the trade. But yeah, and then let's talk about Tom. You had another question about that game, and I think that is a good one to discuss. So. I don't know if you saw this about how kind of Memphis really left Jrue Holiday open on Saturday. This was kind of the story of the game in my eyes. We went on post game. We talked about it right away, but it wasn't, he's always kind of covered in a way where maybe he's getting a little bit less attention than other people on the floor, less attention than he's probably gotten in his whole career. So that's, it's kind of interesting to see. But this was another extreme. He downplayed it. He's a very chill guy. Post game, he was like, I had fun. I like shooting. It's fun to get the shots up. I don't usually get an opportunity to shoot so much. Obviously, I didn't have a good shooting day, but it didn't rattle me or anything. Which is also, even if he didn't feel that way, that's the smart way to say. But Porzingis, who usually is very honest and authentic with the press, he said, it was weird to see the Celtics, the Grizzlies leave Jrue open, and Jrue finished the game 8 of 26 from the field. So he kind of shot his way out of that game. And then they ended up closing with Pritchard, who's going to be who we talk about for the remainder of this episode. So curious, Dad, for your take on just the philosophy of leaving a guy open. And we've seen this before, with Jaylen Brown, for example, with the Warriors leaving him open for 3 and then he torched them. So do you think this is something that Jrue is going to see again in the future? Is this something that Celtics should be concerned about? Just curious on that.
I don't think it's going to. I mean, he's a great player. He's a very consistent shooter, and he's going to take whatever you give him. And if you're going to leave him open all night, he'll take 50 shots because he's not somebody that will ever hesitate because you can't get into his head. I don't think. Mentally, he's one of the toughest players, and I've always thought that about him. He's one of the toughest players I've ever seen. Just nothing seems to faze him. He can come down the court, throw up an air ball, throw up another missed shot, miss a layup, and then come down the court on the third play and hit a tough, shot with a guy right in his face as if none of the other 2 plays ever even took place. So he's the wrong guy to kind of play that game with. It happened to work. I think it's by accident that he had an off night, because I think if teams did that, 10 times, I think 9 times they would pay the price. I think it was just kind of a weird night, a weird off shooting night for him. But I definitely don't think it psychologically like set him back or anything like that, because he's not that type of player. I think there's other players that might like freak him out a little bit, but he's definitely not one of them.
Yeah, and I think like even if he's not one of them, like I think it's just like an adjustment that he had to figure out. Like, am I really going to shoot every time? I guess I am. Like, it just throws. Like, to me, it was less about him, and it's more about now the team is not doing what they usually do. Like their offense, which is historically good, is now different because of the defensive adjustment that's being made. Like, I think it was kind of smart of the Grizzlies, even if it didn't work. And honestly, in hindsight, like the Jaylen Brown thing, like the Warriors looked like idiots for that one, because Jaylen had 5 threes in the first few minutes of that game and like had such a, he ended up going off in that game versus Golden State last year. But if Jaylen misses those first 9 shots, like we're talking about a different story. So it's like a little bit of a gamble, but it shows desperacy from the other teams.
It's absolutely desperate.
They're not comfortable with like their personnel. Like they want to.
It's like a one-shot deal. We're going to try this because we don't believe that we can win if we just play straight up. So we're going to try something a little bit awkward and see if it works. And if it doesn't work, we're going to lose by 50, and that's going to be it. They're going to get blown out in the first half. And it worked, but it's not going to work consistently over time. And I think everybody knows that.
Yeah. So I don't think we need to be too concerned about that, but it was interesting to see. I will say, just being at opposing coaches' pregame press conferences, they usually get some question around like, this team is, shooting 63s a night, and you have you have Tatum, you have Brown, you have Derek, you have Pritchard coming off the bench. Like, what do you do? And they always say, like, they always have some funny answer around, like, you really, like, there's not really an answer here. Like, you're just going to compete. Like, I think everybody feels pretty overwhelmed when they see the Celtics on the calendar from a how do you guard them standpoint. So it's not surprising that, I don't want to call it a gimmick, but it's a little gimmicky to be like, we're going to leave a 2-time All-Star open, who last year was elite from 3. This year, he's really struggling. He's down to 32% shooting, 32.8% from 3 this season. So I think it'll level out. We've talked about this before, but this is not a small sample size, his career numbers. Like he's been a pretty consistent. He's at 37% for his career, but he's been better the last few seasons, around 40% for the last 5 years. So there's no reason to think that he's not going to go kind of hover back up. The same way that Sam Hauser started slow, the same way that Pritchard will probably go down a little, you have to imagine. So
maybe not.
Maybe not. So that's a good segue. Let's talk about Pritchard for a few minutes here, because that was the title of this episode. And I know we had Dana Altman over the summer on, and Dana Altman is a college teammate of my dad at Eastern New Mexico. Is that correct? I always want to say he's your coach, but he was your teammate.
No, he was my teammate. He was my buddy. Yeah, we played together for 2 years at Eastern New Mexico. That's where we met, and we stayed in touch over the years.
And that was a really good episode. You can check that out if you haven't seen it before. It was. I'm going to put a link to it, so those of you who are interested. This was an interview with his college coach, basically talking about what we could expect for his upcoming season. He's currently the coach of Oregon University. So he's coached a bunch of NBA players, Dylan Brooks, Payton Pritchard, and he shared a little bit about just his thoughts on Pritchard and also just what he expected from him in the coming year, what he remembered from him from college. So it was really interesting. You can check that out. But we had a lot of conversations about Pritchard this summer and in the past, really about believing him in a player. And I'm curious from your standpoint, how sustainable you think this level of production is at this point. A lot of people think, this is a little bit of a fluke, or not a fluke, but he's having a little bit of an insanity run. Versus I think other people feel like this is the beginning of a guy who might be an all-star. I won't mention names. What are your thoughts around his?
By the way, I was on that hill when you started dying on that hill. I was already on the hill, so I've been living on that hill a long time. Yeah,
I usually run my basketball takes by my dad just to make sure it's not just me, but that might not be enough based on how I've been received by a couple of these. But okay, but yeah, what are your thoughts on?
No, I mean, since the day they drafted him, I watched him in college, and there was something that I saw, and obviously the Celtics saw the same thing. There's something really special about him. He's a really, really special player. He was an awesome player in college. Not just he was picked as the best point guard in the country. It was a COVID kind of awkward year, and a lot of things happened that year. I don't know exactly the details, but the year got messed up with COVID. Anyway, so he had an awesome college career. He's an awesome player. He's one of the most confident players that I've ever seen. and he believes in himself like no other. And I think that the more he's been on the court, the more he's able to show that. But I don't think he ever doubted himself for 1 second. In fact, when you see him being interviewed and when he's talking about it, none of this is surprising to him. He was just waiting for the chance. And I think the Celtics, again, as they seem to be just outsmarting a lot of other teams and the strategies that they use, but they really developed him perfectly. And brought him in, like when they signed him, when he looked like he wasn't even maybe going to be a big player on the team, and then also they signed him to a 3-year contract, for not small money, and it kind of came out of nowhere, if I believe, if I remember correctly, and everybody was like, why would they do that? Why would you do that? Because you believe in a player before they actually show everybody else what they see. But he's legitimate. And he's just, in my opinion, he's going to get better and better. And what he's doing right now, which is really interesting, is that obviously he's got a great handle on the ball, which everybody can see that he's an amazing ball handler, and he's a great outside shooter. And now he's turning into a post player, and that's really like confusing people. The way he's backing guys down, and what's interesting to me, at least my take on it, is that the reason that it's absolutely kind of unstoppable right now is what do? You double down on a point guard. You leave your man and go down and jump into the lane to stop a guy who's, how tall is he? 6 feet tall.
Yeah.
And he's posting a guy up. You're actually going to leave your man because that's a point guard. He sees the court better than anybody. He's gonna hit whoever it is that somebody leaves in 1 second, and that's going to be the end of that one. So this idea of backing guys down has really caused teams, it's a nightmare, because what do you do now? And the way that he does it is something that also, I don't know, how much they've broken it down, how much you guys have been talking about it, but I've been watching it really carefully. He's doing it with strength, and he's doing it with his arms. He's got this move where he's kind of sticking his elbow out and driving it into guys. And God help you trying to guard that one, because he's super strong. He's low to the ground. And he's got the ability to push off and then do this fadeaway, short mid-range jump shot. It is absolutely unstoppable. I mean, it looks like he can do it anytime he wants to. And if they don't somehow get the ball out of his hands down there, it seems like he always ends up with kind of an easy not even a mid-range. It's like almost like a floater in there. And it's really some move that he's developed. So the combination of everything that he's doing, taking guys off the dribble, shooting the three, like every time he shoots it, I think it's going in, because his shot looks absolutely identical every time he shoots the ball. He's one of the most pure shooters I've ever seen. Every time he shoots the basketball, it looks the same. It never comes out of his hand differently. And that's why, like, when it doesn't go in, I'm like, wow, I thought that was going in, because I think every shot he lets go is going in. So the combination of all that, offensive rebounding, real tough defender. I mean, if you can't just take advantage of him, because he's the wrong guy to think you're going to take advantage of. So in my opinion, to answer your question, he's legit, and he is going to be, I believe, an all-star. And the only thing that worries me is how you're going to keep him on this team, because it just, that's going to be a challenge, is because he's not going to be able to accept a backup role for another 3 or 4 years. He just won't be able to do that when he knows that he could really be a superstar in the league. And I believe that one day he will be.
So you guys see, this is where I get my confidence in this position from. It's funny because someone here, cool genuine Phil, wrote, PP has developed a fadeaway like JB. Jalen was talking the other night, because Pritchard's been wearing his shoes quite a bit. It's like, which I have to say, I'm not much of a shoe person. I didn't like Jalen's shoes at the beginning because they kind of looked funky, like they had the little diamond looking things on them, but actually they're really cool now. They've grown on me. Maybe it's because I've seen so many good Jaylen Brown and Pritchard games in those shoes that they've become cool. And Jordan Walsh was wearing those shoes yesterday in Maine. So there's definitely some popularity, among the team in those shoes. But Jalen was saying, not just, he's not just wearing my shoes, but he's like kind of getting in my bag. Like he's hitting all the moves that I have.
Right.
Like, he almost was saying it like, I need those moves back. And it's funny because Jalen's had a slightly less efficient season than he's used to. He's at about 45% from the field, down from like almost 50% last year, which I think will even out. But maybe Pritchard did steal a couple of his moves, because he has been, that mid-range shot, and it's just the separation that he gets on. It always astounds me, no matter who's guarding him. We've talked about this, but I feel like almost the most valuable thing is that the Celtics offense is historically great. Everybody knows last year they had the best offense in NBA history. But sometimes late in the shot clock, like everybody knows the more time that you leave an NBA defense, you let an NBA defense set, the better that defense is. So shots in the last 5 seconds of a shot clock are very low percentage, no matter who's shooting them. And I have to get all the advanced analytics on this, but I think when it's the last few seconds, like Pritchard's your best shot. So if the offense has broken down and the play you were running or the action you were doing did not pan out in a clean look, at that point, I would like my instinct is like give the ball to Pritchard, because I feel like he's made something out of nothing so many times now. And we've talked about like the end of quarter heaves and half court shots, but those are like, that's a few plays over the years. That's not really like day to day what matters, but it's the end of shot clock shots that sometimes have been actually so impactful that he's able to just create separation, or the offensive rebounds too, because honestly, like that, every time someone asks Joe Mazzulla about Pritchard, and I've mentioned this before, he almost has like he's almost like AI coded, that he will automatically say, and what about his offensive rebound? The most important thing he did today was his offensive rebound. Like he wants to make sure the narrative around Pritchard is not about his scoring, and that it's about the other things that he does, like how much he's improved as a defender. But it's, from an offensive rebounding standpoint, it's not just the number of them, but how critical they are down the stretch. And what I always notice is it's not that guys are falling asleep. Like all the time you see somebody get an offensive rebound and you go back and rewatch the play, and it's like the person that was guarding them literally just forgot about them. When we talk about like
Derek, he goes over people and gets them. He's going right over top of people.
This guy knows what he's going to do. It's on the scouting report that he's going to get an offensive rebound. So especially down the stretch, like you see guys, like they're literally, before the shots went up, they're focusing on boxing him out. And so he still finds a way to get around them. The Celtics posted a really good video today that just gave like a behind the scenes look at his game. And Craig Lucianid, who is currently the player development director, who's worked really closely with Pritchard and Hauser, talks a little bit in that. So if you haven't checked that out, you can find that. I think they posted it on Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, everywhere. So that's just a short clip, but it was a good watch, because you don't often hear from the player development coaches. They're not really in the media circuit. So it was interesting to hear about how hard he's worked, as we hear oftentimes behind the scenes. So we'll do a couple more minutes on Pritchard. I just want to take a quick second here to thank our friends over at Prize Picks. We did thank our friends over at Game Time, and I think other people here might have to thank our friends over at Game Time too for some of the games they've gotten to go to. Prize Picks, on the other hand, is the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You can just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 200 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. You can make your holidays bigger and brighter with Prize Picks, the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports. And you can now win up to 200 times your money on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get action on sports in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Prize Picks now offers MasterCard for quick and easy deposits into your account this sports season. Join now, because this holiday season, Prize Picks is giving away 2 free picks in December, and they're giving away $30+ million in rewards throughout Picksmith. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. Okay, so last thing I wanted to just say about Pritchard is I think there's this question around like, what is his future in Boston? Because I've maintained that I think he's going to be an all-star. And I was on Sherrod's podcast, the Big Three podcast that he does with Kwani and Gary Washburn. And we were talking about like, what if that all-star berth that I view as a potential thing in his future? I don't mean like he for sure will be an all-star, because Derek White's never been an all-star and might not be an all-star. Like I don't, but I mean that caliber of player that's in those conversations.
Yeah, it's not about who votes for him. It's about if he gets to that level of an all-star.
Right. We've seen worse all-stars than guys that have never been all-stars. Like I don't really, that actual designation is not the point. It's more that category of player. And then I think it begs the question of like, what does a starting guard Pritchard look like if Jrue Holiday is no longer in the Celtics? Because I hate to do this, especially when they're winning. Like I really do hate that we have this conversation, but Jrue Holiday is 34, 35. I think he's going to be 35 this year. So he's 34. And he just signed a 4-year a massive extension. And so when we talked about, is Jrue Holiday going to be the starting guard on the Celtics when he's 38? I actually have no idea. Like, I don't rule out any of these guys because of how much they take care of their bodies, because of guys like Al Horford who have shown that we can keep talking about his age and it doesn't really make a huge difference. So I don't know that Jrue Holiday definitely won't be on the Celtics in a few years, but there is a feasible pathway where he's not, because they're just looking at their payroll and he's going to be one of the most expensive contracts and a guy who's going to be on the tail end of his career. And in that case, I do think Pritchard can be a starting guard. And defensively, like if you're playing alongside Derek White, like if there's a guy that can help you defensively, like he's that guy. Jrue Holiday and Derek White have talked about what it's done for their own individual defense to play alongside one another. So I think it's feasible. I know the Celtics it is tough when he's out there. Like there is a guy that can be a mismatch and teams go after him. But I think that's just part of the game. Like there's when Luke Cornett's on the floor, like you're losing something on the shooting end. He's gotten better. He's gotten stronger. He's never going to be able to get taller. Like that's just the reality. So, but yeah, I think it's feasible. So I wouldn't be shocked if he's the starting guard in a few years, because either Drew's on the bench or Derek. I don't want to.
No, he's definitely going to be a starting guard in the NBA in the next 3 or 4 years.
But could it be in Boston? That's the question.
Yeah, it could definitely be in Boston. Yes, in my opinion, definitely could be in Boston, because he's young. He's got a long way to go, and somebody like Jrue Holiday would absolutely accept coming off the bench if that was what they were asking of him. This is the ensemble that they put together. These guys they're all ready to do whatever they need to do in order to keep winning. They would have no problem. That's the kind of the magic of this team, is that everybody's ready to do whatever they need to do, and everybody knows that when you win, everybody gets credit for everything. Everybody's going to be riding on the bus going down Com Ave and Boylston Street, and nobody cares who started when they win a championship. Nobody cares about the stats anymore. I think it definitely could be a possibility very much in the near future.
Yeah. So and Tom brings up a good point here that I think twice now, unless I'm forgetting a game, twice now Pritchard has closed for Jrue down the stretch. I think twice, because it was the Indiana game, the one that went to overtime, and then the other night he closed down the stretch with Jrue struggling and Pritchard having a really big offensive performance. So it's definitely possible. I think outside of Jalen and Tate and Jason, like they're always going to finish games regardless of anything. Like they're always going to finish, even if they've had a bad night. That's just, I've realized that at this point, where they could have a nightmare game, they're going to close. Outside of that, I think there's some interchangeability. We've seen Porzingis last year. There were games where he didn't close because Al was playing better than him. Jrue this year was playing fine in games where Pritchard closed. I don't know if Derek would ever not close. Derek might be in the Jalen and Jason category of like he's always going to finish games. But I don't think that he would mind if we didn't close. I don't think he would have any problem with it. So there is a culture on this team.
Joe's going to do whatever he sees is going to win the game, and that's the difference between what he does and the way he looks at coaching as opposed to many other coaches. He's not afraid to, and none of those guys are going to give him any. They're not going to give him any pushback anyway. I don't think, because they believe in what he's doing, and what he's doing is working, and that's it. He's got it. He's got the magic right now. I think he's ready to roll with it.
Yeah, and I think there's a good point here by Patrick that a lot of times when we're talking about guys' happiness and on this team in their role, a lot of it is also not just about where they can score the most points. I do think they all like to score a lot of points. Like it's funny because Porzingis was asked the other day, like how nice is it to not have to be the primary option anymore and to have like so much talent around you? And he was like, no, I like being the primary option. Like it's like I'll be like I'm okay with the setup and things, but like I think guys like shooting a lot. That's like the nature of why you play basketball. So Jrue mentioned it the other night. Like I had so much fun shooting a lot. Like it's it was actually I didn't mind it. Obviously he didn't shoot great, but I think beyond their individual role and their willingness to sacrifice, the things that maybe you don't see on TV as much is like what the family environment is like. Jrue has multiple kids. They're all in school in Boston. He's already been uprooted a number of times. He's been traded twice in his career. He's close friends. His kids are friends with other players on the team's kids. There's a big family environment on the team. I wrote this story last week. I don't usually plug. Actually, I guess I sometimes do plug my stories here, but I'm just going to put this in the chat if you're curious, if you want to read about just the family environment that Joe Mazzulla and the Celtics have created. Jrue has been one of the biggest beneficiaries of it. It's not he's not a huge part of the story, but his kids are everywhere. They are on the sidelines. His family's all around. So I think a lot of these guys, like they don't want to, they love to finish their careers here, and that's just the general impression that you get. And obviously, winning helps breed that, but it's also things beyond just winning. So this is, I'm going to wrap it up in a moment. If there are any other closing questions, feel free to put them in. I think where we're at right now is the Celtics are off tomorrow. They were off today. They were off yesterday. So we got 3 days off of practice. And Wednesday, they'll be back in action. I think it'll probably be a long one. We'll have coverage on the ground from there. And we might actually have a studio show on Wednesday as well. Thursday, Celtics are at home. You can check out tickets for that on Game Time versus the Pistons.
Any chance of getting tickets for that game? No.
Let's see how much they cost. Let me see, actually, so I can tell the people. Thursday night, this was a makeup game. So if the Celtics were playing, Celtics had won the last game or the Hawks game back then, or the point differential thing had worked out, they would not be playing the Pistons. They'd be playing the Knicks tomorrow on Wednesday in Madison Square Garden. Okay, these are as cheap a tickets that you will ever see. $30. You will never see tickets this. I mean, this is not even me like.
I borrow $30.
So if anybody wants to see the Celtics in person, I think you're going to see a full cast because they're coming off days of rest. Thursday night, $34. That's the cheapest ticket of the year probably, and it's because it wasn't on sale as of like the game just got scheduled, so nobody bought tickets before a couple days ago. So, I might buy some holiday presents, some early holiday presents on Game Time for Celtics Pistons. You can check those out. We'll have our post-game show, The Garden Report. In the meantime, please subscribe to my YouTube channel, You Got Boston Podcast. You can also subscribe to CLNS Media, Celtics All Access for the rest of our coverage. Feel free at any point if there's things you want me to ask, get into, talk to the players, coaches about. Like some of you have asked me, can you ask the players about Jalen's shoes? I have. So if it's an appropriate question, I'll do it. Sometimes there's good inspiration. We all ask a lot of the same questions over and over again. So it's good to hear what the fans want to hear. So feel free to message me on Twitter. It's the best place to find me. And thank you all so much for joining. Thank you for welcoming my dad, who has actually been on a couple of times now. This is our first time going live. So I don't know. Can you see all the comments too? You can read them? I
can't see any comments.
Oh, you can't see the comments?
No.
He's missed the experience.
Nobody asked me anything.
If you clicked on comments, you would have been able to see them this whole time.
Next time.
But do you see when I post them on the thing? So
yes.
That will be a Pritchard night. $34. Not to diminish $34. I understand it's still legitimate money, but that's as cheap as it will get for a Celtics game. And if you go to other NBA cities, you can get cheaper tickets. So with that, I'll close. Everyone enjoy your Monday night. We will be back with more coverage this week. Have a great rest of your week. I think it's a slow NBA night, only one game tonight. So if you have other hobbies to do, this is a good night to try those. Have a good one, everyone. Thanks, Dad, for joining.
You're welcome. Thank you.